Hello, everyone, and I would like to welcome you. My name is Mohamad Najem from SMAX. I am pleased to have Ashraf Zeitoon with us. He is the first director of policies in the MENA region. Ashraf started on the issue of Facebook since 2012 and until 2017. I can remember Ashraf in 2014 in the Arab Forum for Internet Governance in Beirut. Days pass quickly, so I can remember when we talked and we were discussing. Maybe you were for less than 1 year in your position. We talked a lot on how you can see the issues, and I felt that you have optimism and you are very energetic, active in the region, and there is an approach you would like to follow. I would like to ask you, in 2017 you left. Can you tell us quickly what happened? And of course I have questions and I would like to listen to the attendants if they have questions. Good evening, Mohamad. It is a pleasure to be with you in SMAX. We are here ready to assist you. When you talked to me for the first time regarding this session, I tried to remember all my startings and the beginnings, and I can remember in 2013, 2014 is like a honeymoon period in the region or for the region with Facebook. So Facebook got acquainted with the region in 2010 after the Arab Spring. Of course, we're not interested about the numbers, but the Arab Spring is one of the main factors of launching this platform in the whole Arab world, and other technical issues that assisted in these matters, and also for the people to know that in any state, whenever a 3G will be presented, the Facebook will be increasing highly, because the 3G will be giving an opportunity for the users to use their mobiles, to see pictures, to see videos, to see lots of issues that are considered as an important factor. And after that period, there was a huge challenge for Facebook on how to deal with the Arab Spring and the challenges created with the link between Facebook and the Arab Spring. And here I can see that they started to talk to me in 2012. Other factors also in 2014, the first president for the general policies of Facebook in the Arab region and the MENA region talked to me, and there was lots of challenges in that area. They had a planned association and a huge number of Arab employees present in the Arab region, but in this position in the general policies, we didn't find any person. Maybe Dubai office was opened a month ago in that period, and the main challenge is how to deal with the situation, with the region, the growth, the number of subscribers in the platform is high, and also on another hand, lots of Arab governments that are knocking the door in order to or at the first level there was an anxiety in this period for the Arab government. They don't know what to do, and we heard about this Facebook platform, and lots of responsibles and officials they told us that Facebook did the Arab Spring, so the governments considered this because of the Facebook. It included lots of Arab activists. So in this platform, it created a space for interaction, and it helped in the mobilization and getting together in the Arab world. They had a huge panic and fear. I don't want to cut you, but here I have a question, especially when Facebook went to Dubai, to the Emirates. The main concern we have here, and we don't have a clear answer on it or something direct to know it. We are talking about Facebook company claiming itself as the main part of the Arab Spring. Of course, I won't go into details about the subject. This company is supporting the freedom of expression, and it's at the most region where no individual freedom of expression, general liberties. So how can you see this contradiction, and why is this decision by Facebook? Is it a business decision, or we have something else? For the first point, in order to clarify it, Facebook at any time did not adopt the Arab Spring, so it did not do it. It's so that we are the platform for this spring. So let's be far away from the direct link regarding the Arab Spring. This was a very clear. This is a very clear clarification. And as for Dubai office, let's think that I am the vice president and I am looking into the region where there is a huge growth in the state, a huge number of publicities are coming in, and unfortunately in the region we have a choice of bad options, so to choose among options that are not excellent. So whenever you look into Dubai, you can see it is the safest region or city on the economic level, etc., to reach or access other Arab regions. There is the establishment of the company without any conditions, requirements, the property of the company, transfer of funds. So it is worldly linked to the other companies. So whenever someone will look into these 5 factors and we put the other factor aside, I will tackle it later on. So when you see these factors, there's nothing to add. So let's say about Lebanon and Jordan, they can compete about the skills. Lebanon cannot be similar to Dubai regarding security and safety. So most of these companies, they took this decision from an economic point of view. In addition, we need to be well aware of that, and there was a knowledge of a great number of risks in the Emirates. For example, one of the main issues, the staff inside the company in Dubai, they don't have access to the data of users, whereas other offices, they can access the users' data. So no one in Dubai office had the capacity to reach the users. Is this linked to your presence in the Emirates or into another subject? No, for the first subject is to create what we call firewall in order to protect the office and the data of users. And this subject is not only related to the Emirates. Lots of bureaus worldwide, the employees cannot reach the users' data. And whenever this decision was taken, of course, by the companies, this was one of the main decision, as we said, and other companies, so that this can be an addition of protection, not to reach the threat in order to reach the users' data. And we can see it from different point of views. Lots of companies worldwide take a decision based on pure economic views. we did not see any company, Facebook or others, whenever they look to take this decision in any country from a pure economic level, other factors to protect the data, freedom, human rights of freedom. But frankly speaking, the companies, they can respect the human values, and lots of decisions are being taken on the economic level, and whereas the economic pure interest for the company, this is one of the main factor or issues. And when we saw lots of companies headquarters around the world, the subject was as is, and these decisions are taken based on the logic of SMEX and other platforms. Ashraf, maybe I cut you with this question. You were talking about the honeymoon. Why it was like this, why it ended? So the first period was the honeymoon. It's called like this in order to get acquainted with the company and to, of course, the internet conflict reached all the aspects of life. Even in the Middle East, we have this technology going quickly and rapidly, and in this period, the team was increasing, and a lot of descriptions need to be presented to get acquainted with the companies, lots of conferences. So all this was in the industry. We didn't hear any bad news about this industry at that time. It was a part of a meeting with the governments and more than 15 governments, and there was a type of fear of confiscating this Facebook, but they want to get acquainted with us. They heard that it is doing something different, but we need to know them. We need to meet them. We had a meeting with the Prime Minister of Algeria. Nowadays, he is in detention. Whenever we met him, it was in Tunisia, and Tunisia was using Facebook, about 25 million users. And whenever I met with the Prime Minister in an Arab region, a huge country, with 9 ministers sitting in front of me. So the whole government, you mean? So they were all present, and I'm giving this to you as an example, as an experience. So this wasn't known for them how to benefit from it, how some people will benefit, how others have this sense of fear, this unknown fear, this unknown beast. How can we benefit from it? And the Prime Minister at that time told us if we have more information. So whenever you look into these issues and about the insights that you can take from 25 million users in Algeria using this platform or other applications, that would be very important and interesting, and let us to create some resources. So Facebook at that time was the darling of the Silicon Valley, and Tunisia was on internet. They were using YouTube, Facebook, everything in a very strategic way that is used. So Facebook was everything in Tunisia. I can remember this. I apologize if I'm being late. For example, I met a person working in an office for a friend. Whenever I met him, I asked him about Facebook. He was surprised, and I asked him, what does Facebook mean to you? he told me lots of stories through Facebook. I got the first job after 5 years. And through Facebook, I was able to meet my wife at that time. And at the end, he told me with Facebook, we were able to get rid of totalitarianism. So the Facebook opened the world for them. So the company had the power at that time, and a part of it needed to go with the government, not to get the information, personal information from the company. There are lots of factors and controls that needed to be followed. So that's why we considered this period as a honeymoon with the relations with the whole people there. We have two questions. I apologize, Ashraf, but I'm asking you here.
اول سؤال لانه حكيت عن الحكومات ورحت تونس وجزائر، وبتذكر كنت شوفك دائما على الفيسبوك حاطط تشيك ان بكل مره بلد. يعطيك العافيه. فاول سؤال لك هو، كانت كمان بهالفتره فيسبوك عم تطلع شيء اسمه تقارير الشفافيه ترانسبيرنسي ريبورت. بتذكر مثلا اذا كنا عم نطلع ببلد مثل المانيا او فرنسا بيكون في مئات او الاف الطلبات، بس كنا نطلع مثلا بالامارات او بالجزائر او غيره بنشوف 4-5 طلبات بالسنه او بالست اشهر، لانه هذا التقرير كان يطلع كل 6 اشهر وبعده اظن عم بيطلع. قد ايه هيدا التقرير عن جد؟
So to which extent the report is reflecting the fact and the reality, which type of demands you were receiving? I wanted to listen from you regarding this point, and I have another issue. The numbers were decreased at the beginning because they didn't know about the process, and they sent an email and the Facebook, they couldn't convince the government that they are not part of them. So you need to commit by a very controlled process and operation, and it needs to require lots of information. The numbers were true at that time because lots of governments couldn't reach this platform to submit reports. Lots of governments tried at the beginning but they didn't present committed demands. So whenever they participate with the platform, they said, no, we don't want them. And after that, there is a huge number of governments using different ways. Of course, the report is transparent, but representing a part of the picture. Lots of governments required to delete pages, to close accounts, to do this. So the request for data in this Arab world, we saw it as the worst experience of governments in the Arab world. We have the governments of Israel is very pioneer in this issue. So lots of governments wanted to present requests to delete pages, and through different other private companies presented by governmental institutions that are adopted and relied. So any other requests outside this context won't go into the report. And after that, the government started to use different types and they want to enter into in any way. And later on, they will know that they will be having a headache by closing. If they close the Facebook, a general told me that, of course, they has 10 millions on this platform. Let them talk freely. So I'm following the thing. I try to know the people. I try to spy on their accounts. I try to close them. So to close the Facebook or the platform will lead into lots of problems, and lots of people are sitting in front of the keyboard. If we close it is difficult, and we will be having a matter or a difficulty with the people. So we need to tackle it on different levels. All the Arab words did not prohibit Facebook at all, but they need to close the whole internet. Previously they were active on Facebook, but nowadays it's different. I met a minister, and we talked to them, and we reached an agreement. So Algeria and Iraq also used it, and at that time they prohibited the internet, not only the Facebook, because people are becoming wiser and they know how to post things on one block or another. It's not limited to Facebook or not. Here I have some couple of questions. A question regarding Facebook. You mentioned that Facebook is very important for lots of people, and even Facebook administration knew that as it is the only available platform for lots of people, Algeria, Tunisia, or any Arab state, but we don't have any democratic dimension for expression or political activity. So any additional resources Facebook was trying to do in order to protect this space for the people?
بمنطقتنا العربية حسيت يعني
any resources being directed were related to initiatives from individuals inside the company. The contact moderation team was present, and lots of young people were present, and they saw their belief in the values, and they worked a lot. I cannot say that there was an initiative on the level of the company. Lots of initiatives were conducted by a great number of employees, and we worked together, and we created a base in order to support these issues. One of the main initiatives and successful ones we worked on is to protect the users in the tyrannic states. So we were able to create a system in the company. Anyone detained or arrested, his account will be freezed in order also or to be deleted, and in order not to reactivate it again. This is one of the main initiatives and other initiatives conducted by different individuals, giving their time to work on them. So there were no initiatives from the company. Now we are talking about the era of 2014, 2015. Now we are in 2021, entering in 2022. So can we expect that there was a lack of cadres to manage the platform? So now we can feel and notice, and there is a lack of the management of the content in the Arab world, and we saw in the leakages we saw lately that two companies are working on the content management in Morocco and Germany, and a Moroccan company is bringing 90% of the content, but they are wrong, and 70% of the Arab content are being wrong on the content management. Why it's happening like this on the level of the content management? Is it an intended lack from the company not to give resources, or where can you see the responsibility here? At the beginning, there were no problems. The team was present, a strong team, and the outsource from the companies in different positions. But at the time, we need to be well aware that in 2016, a starting point of a new page. At the 2015, we had Daesh, and later the fake news war in the Gulf states. And after that, we had the development of some countries of how to use a Facebook platform and to use it in a legitimate way. So lots of factors pressed over what was present, and with it a huge number of users. So Facebook in the Middle East nowadays is the second or third in the geographic area. So the number is more than 2,050 million users, without mentioning Facebook, Instagram, or other applications. Go ahead, please. So lots of these factors pressed over the system, and we can remember the war on Daesh was very strong, and they also were dealing with the content that cannot be supportable, and they were seeing the worst content in the platform, and lots of this will be pressing over them psychologically. So they couldn't deal with it, on how to manage it, and how to increase the resources, and for example, how we will create a company here and there, and lots of challenges were faced. For example, you have lots of factors that couldn't help you in Morocco and Egypt and in the Gulf states, but the number increased later on. It's not our way to deal with the subject, and the main lesson here is Facebook is using different technology, is exerting a type of digital colonization, from the point that we don't have a problem to have money. For example, if I don't know if I'm right or no, the Facebook income of Facebook in the Middle East is high, so they don't pay taxes anywhere, so they don't have a problem to benefit and to invest like any other or previous colonial state. But the main challenge here is that a problem will occur, and the problem is not when Arab state will present complaints, because no single Arab state did it because of some private reasons, and no single Arab state issued legislations for the digital platforms or tried to impose taxes. Facebook is dealing with any subject, whether through a foreign pressure or journalistic pressure, so from foreign companies. This is the only way that will oblige Facebook to deal with any subject. In Libya, there was a subject days ago. Libya dealt with Facebook when there was the CSOs, UN agencies, and media people talked about the issue of human tracking and other experiences. Though at that case, they dealt with Facebook without any pressure from foreign governments or CSOs or journalistic sites. That's why they try to get the most income always.
هيدا بيفتح السؤال الثاني يلي انا نحن لنا فتره كمان عم
This
نحكي
brings us to the
فيه
next
بمحتوى.
question that we've been thinking about with
هلا اول
regards
شيء انا عندي سؤال
to
لإلك، يمكن
data
تقريبا
or
موظفي
content
فيسبوك
management. Now, my question
اداره
here
محتوى
is
بالمنطقه
how
العربيه
much did
وين، وهيدا
Facebook
سؤال مهم
employees
ما كنا
work
حكينا
on
فيه
content
قبل.
management in the Arab region? So this is the question that no one was answering before that. Compared
مقارنه
to
ببلد مثل
a
المانيا
country
300
like
مليون،
Germany,
ونحن مثلا منطقتنا
the
وصلنا
number
200
is
مليون.
80 million. In our region, this number is 300 million. So I'm going to give you an example here. I left the company for what reason? I was handling the accounts of Facebook, Instagram for a region that spanned across Africa to Afghanistan. And unfortunately, this was not a stable region. And then if we take, for example, Spain, there was 54,000 users, but by the time I left the country, this number reached 157,000 users. So why is that? Well, the answer is simple. If it's not broken, then don't fix it. So we saw that the system is working. There is no pressure that's being exercised by the government. And this decision came from the higher direction. So in Germany, for example, the biggest challenge that was posed to Facebook was that when the German government decided new rules to deal with hate speech. So, of course, Facebook here did what they always do, is that they basically try to solve this problem with money. Sheryl Sandberg went to Germany and she set a team to work on that. And she said that we're going to establish a coding school, for example. But in the Arab region, no one took responsibility for this issue with regards to Facebook. So this is not just what's happening in the Arab region, and it's not colonization or discrimination against the Arab people. This is discrimination against basically third world countries. So this is what happened in Africa. Mark went to Africa just because this would look attractive and it is basically the flavor of the month. So they do not deal with third world countries properly, the situation. So they feel like they need to make as much income as they can without spending more than the minimum of resources in order to guarantee the security and the privacy of users. So in Facebook, we have three levels. The first level is AI and algorithms, and this deals with approximately 75 to 80% of the reporting on that platform. And we have 15% that deal with people who deal with third-party organizations, and they are found within the company. And then the third level is the employees in that company that work on content moderation. So these people deal with 2 to 3% of the issues that were escalated. So these are requests from governments or highly sensitive requests. So these people are eligible to do so, and their number reaches 25 people. So there are 25 people working in content moderation. Germany assigned 400 people for content moderation after the German government issued a decision that forced them to do so. And that forced them to moderate content and accounts that spread hate speech, or else they will be fined. So this is why they hired these people, because they thought it would be better to hire 400 people than to pay these fines. So I'm not talking here about conspiracies, but it's very important to remember that this is not only limited to the Arab region. It is with regards to how companies deal with third world countries in a colonial way. So in Iraq, for example, Iraq was the third biggest market. And then for that, we had one out of every 20 people on the team in Berlin working on content moderation who knew how to speak the Iraqi language. So they didn't think that they needed more than one person for that. So I understand that there's a lack of attention to the problem of content moderation. And then there are people like you or people who came after you who worked in that position. You saw that there is great damage that is being that's happening because of the company's practices in that regard. So how is the relationship between you and the headquarters in San Francisco and Washington, and what do you think is possible to be done in that position? Were you a decision maker or were you just implementing the orders that were given to you? When I was working in the company, I saw that 90% of my time is going to be spent on working with external parties, government, CSO, organizations, and 10% would be spent internally. But unfortunately, it turns out that this is not the case. And after a couple of months, I noticed that my effort should be distributed 50-50 between these two sides. So while working in that position, I would be ambassador of Facebook in Middle East. And Facebook hires the smartest people in the world. But it is very important to remember, and you know that the US is very smart, but there isn't enough attention that's being given to certain regions in the world. And I was told that I should talk to the parliament, for example, so that they can lift the block off of certain types of content, for example. So a large number of the hours spent during my work was spent on trying to solve this issue. So a lot of my effort was being spent on this. So when you try to lobby or pressure towards certain policies, it's very important for these people to know the context for these policies that we are working on. So this was the biggest challenge that I faced. And there are a lot of people who have false perceptions of this region. And therefore, the biggest challenge was how to exercise internal pressure within that company in order to reach policies that do not go against the policies of Facebook, but rather policies that are more in line with the perspective that we want to adopt in the Arab world. So this was the biggest challenge, and there was a big opportunity to achieve that change and to impact these people. But unfortunately, I reached a dead end with that regard because I realized that people are listening to me, but if you do not have the appropriate resources to deal with this part of the world, and if you don't have enough mobilization, then you're not going to achieve your goals. But now we realize that these challenges are increasing and multiplying. So you want to solve these challenges and you want to start building positive aspects in other places. Unfortunately, this was the reality of the policies and the challenges that we try to work on, and it's not sustainable. So these policies were completely not sustainable. And there were sometimes threats that were given by some legislative organizations in this regard. And unfortunately, that was the case. And we do not see that happening in Europe, for example, but this is happening in the Arab world. So here, any type of legislation that's being issued goes against the benefit of the citizens. And of course, this is the reality. And here, I would like to talk about Palestine because we haven't discussed this yet. And you talked before about Israel. We saw in May what happened. And we saw that this company apologized more than once for having taken the wrong decisions. But we also saw how their algorithms are completely biased to the Israeli speech, and their algorithms block the Palestinian cause or any stories about the Palestinian cause. So I would like to hear from you. What was this reality? What can you tell us about this reality, about your time working in that company? during the first period when I was found in the company, I was working in the company, we didn't have this issue. Palestine entered at later stages onto social media platforms because in order for them to do so, they should get authorization from the Israeli authorities. So this is why they were late to enter social media platforms, and this started to happen at the beginning of 2015, if I'm not wrong, and they started having 3G networks. So here there was a burst on social media, and there were campaigns that were being conducted. So here the Palestinians started having a platform to express their opinions. So here the numbers started to increase a lot. And here the Israeli authorities started to pay attention to that. So as we said, the numbers started to increase, and it really burst within the last couple of months where I was working at Facebook. So if I'm wrong, that happened in 2015, and therefore Israel started to limit social media platforms through a new legislation, and it started to block content that incites the violence or hate during a short period. And Facebook handled this by signing a memorandum of understanding with them. So after this period, the first director of public policies for Facebook in Israel was appointed. So this was the first time that this happens in any market. It only happened in Israel. So Israel was an exception. And other countries had teams such as in Germany and Spain. And these countries had a large base of users of Facebook. So here, as we said, Facebook, as usual, tried to solve this problem by spending a lot of money and appointing a large number of people. And this was the beginning of a close collaboration between Israel and Facebook. So during my past couple of days at the company, I had to deal with some of these issues, and I had to adopt a smart approach in order to solve these cases. One of these cases was related to targeting. So if you were to target users in one of the Israeli settlements, there was an issue between the separation of Israeli settlements and the Palestinian land. So if you want to advertise, for example, these advertisements would start to appear on Palestinian territories, and this should not happen. So this is why there were attempts within the company to categorize the western side of Palestine as a conflicted region and not as a settlement. So we try to block this approach, and of course it has a lot of impacts on users who live in these settled areas. So this was my only experience with such an issue. And of course, as I said, I wasn't found in that company when there were debates concerning anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. So I was found only at the beginning of that issue. And of course, there were a lot of reasons for that, because there was lobbying and pressure in order to support the Israeli cause or the Israeli settlement within the company. A lot of Arab youth that work in the company come from countries where unfortunately the situation is very bad, and they move to Dublin so that they can get the German passport. So this is why they try to create self-surveillance, for example, if we might say. Again, as we said, they try to stay as much as possible in Dublin so that they wouldn't have to return to Syria or Lebanon or Iraq.
بس بنفس الوقت ما بقدر اقلل انه في كان هناك كثير من الناس
But
الشجعان
of course, there
واعتمدوا
were a
هاي
lot of people who were courageous enough
الفرصة
not to
باستغلال
let
الوظيفة انه يأثر على مبادئهم.
their
وانا بتذكر كم
jobs
من وبلاحظ
compromise
كان
their
هناك
principles.
صبايا اللي كانوا اكثر ناس يوقفوا
And a lot of these people that used
خلقت لهم
to
عدوات
stand up for their principles were girls, and that created a lot of problems for them within the company. And there were problems with their bosses, and this affected their careers as well.
طب أشرف،
Ashraf, we
بتتوقع إنه
noticed that the
الشركة
company
أحياناً
sometimes
تعتذر؟ هل هي
apologizes.
وسيلة من
Is
التحرر
this a
بالنسبة
way
لك أنت
to
كمدير؟
basically run away from
أحياناً
handling their
المواضيع بتصير
responsibility and,
بتحكي
as you
لحالي ولا
said,
هي بتعتذر
spend money on the
بيقولوا لي
problem
خلصيني
basically
اعتذروا
just to
كذا
solve
مرة،
it?
بس لحد هلا ما شفنا تقريبا أي
So
شيء
until
عم
now, we
يصير
didn't see
بشان
that
حل هذا
anything
الموضوع. فكيف شايف
practical
أنت وظيفتك
happened on the
وحياتك
ground in
بالتواصل؟
order to solve these problems. What do you think of that?
فيسبوك يعني لما تحكي للناس اللي
When you
بيشتغلوا
talk to
بمجال
people who
مواقع
work in social media, they laugh because Facebook when is known as a company that tries to run away from this responsibility. So if you read the book called Ugly Truth inside Facebook, it is a very great book. And if you look at the cover, you can see all of the apologies issued by Facebook. So over the past couple of years, Mark Zuckerberg issued a lot of these apologies, but you can't keep basically kidding people with these apologies. So now, even with what happened in Palestine, what we saw happening over the past couple of years, and the attacks on Palestinian media showed that nothing has changed so far. So everything that they do is apologize, try to sideline the issue, try to focus the attention on something else, turn the attention away from that issue. So here we saw that in Facebook, nothing changed. So Israel exercises pressure on Facebook, and this is what happens. This is what they always do. And unfortunately, this is also what's happening in the Arab world. So even if these countries try to stand up for this issue, they don't have enough resources to raise their voices and stand up in the face of these attacks. So if they intend on doing so, as we said, they don't have the capacities and the resources to exercise pressure on Facebook to support their cause. So we're going to open the floor for questions. So for the audience, if you have any questions, you can include them in the chat box. We have a question from Amira from Tunisia. She's saying that Facebook in Tunisia is currently a hub for hate speech. So it is where hate speech is mostly spread. So why do you think this happened? Is this because of AI, for example, or is it because countries are using these tactics to spread hate speech? What do you think of this? Over the past, in the past, Tunisia was different. There was positivity, there was optimism. But we should know that social media platforms do not create hatred and hate speech. The content on these platforms are a fraction of our reality and the positions that are taken. So these platforms are used as a way to amplify these sentiments. So if Mohamad and I were to exchange positive words on social media platforms, no one's going to interact with us. But if we start to talk about more specific and controversial topics, then we're going to receive more engagement because the algorithm works on spreading these posts that contain hate speech on other people's timelines. So as we said, positive news does not get spread via this algorithm. But when it comes to false information and hate speech, they are spread more and more by these
ولما
algorithms.
تظهر الحقيقة بعدين الله يوفقهم كيف ليقدروا يعبوا شو اسمه ويحاولوا يدحضوا الأخبار المضللة للذكرى.
So therefore, after this happens, it's very hard to fight this false information. So this is related to what happened with ISIS. When ISIS started to spread false information, it was very easy for it to be spread on social media. So if someone were to spread new information or a new sort of speech, they should start basically working from scratch to publish new content, and they should exercise more and more efforts or exert more and more efforts to help this positive information spread. But for example, for Mohamad and I, it's very easy for us to spread false information because the algorithms, as we said, are going to support false information and hate speech and encourage their spread. At the same time, the ability to use content by these bad actors to spread rumors and false information has become very easy. In 2014 and 2015, there weren't any Arab governments who had the capabilities to handle or to deal with invisible armies online, those who spread misinformation. But currently, I would like to say that this invisible army is spread all across the world. They are found in Libya, they are found in Tunisia, and they are supported by political parties. So within this space, we have all types of content everywhere, and there's polarization that's happening within the societies. So of course, Facebook tries to profit off of this. So any content that is spread is amplified, and people are encouraged, for example, pay $100 and have your content published even more and more. So basically, when rumors are spread, you have someone behind their screen just
شكرا أشرف.
basically
عندنا
trying to
سؤال
monetize
عن
off of this. We have a question
تشريعات.
about
كيف أنت
legislation. Do you
التشريعات
feel like
والسلاح اللي مثلا
legislation
بتستخدمه المنطقة العربية؟
are the weapon that we use, or is the weapon that we use in the Arab world? Legislation aimed to legalize and regulate these issues. But sometimes this legislation is used to intimidate people. So when Germany, for example, uses this legislation, it tries to do so to protect a certain sector, and it does not do that to attack its citizens or intimidate its citizens. But unfortunately, a lot of Arab countries use these tactics, use this weapon in order to intimidate their citizens. And I haven't seen so far any Arab country trying to regulate that space using legislation. I urge Arab countries to impose taxes on the participation of foreign media companies or foreign tech companies in their economy. Because so far our region is not profiting off of these platforms. So when these legislations are based on good practices and international standards, they could be beneficial to everyone. But unfortunately, I haven't seen any successful experiences in the Arab world that we could benefit from.
تمام. أشرف حابب أخذ منك
Ashraf, I would like you to end your intervention by giving advice to civil society organizations and researchers and analysts in the Arab world, because recently we saw that there is great deterioration with the use of Facebook. There have been a lot of leaks, and Facebook's reply to that was the publishing or the issuing of a Meta. So maybe Meta is going to make this issue even worse. This issue is going to start to invade our personal lives. So what's your advice to the Arab audience or people who are
مناصرين الحريات والحقوق الرقمية اللي كمان عم يتابعونا
basically supporters of digital rights and digital rights activists and who are listening to us today during this session. What would be your advice and what are the tactics that we should use with this regard? So in my opinion, the recent events that happened in Palestine what we saw happening in Palestine recently was one of the best experiences that could show us that we need to work more and more on this issue. So what activists in Palestine did is that they were able to make the Palestinian cause heard all around the world. But they admitted that they failed in their media campaign, and I consider that this is a best practice that we should build on. And I basically want to encourage the establishment of more and more companies, such as SMEX, for example, and other similar companies in the Arab world that support digital rights. So we want to have more and more companies that support digital rights and that advocate for these issues. But unfortunately, here in the Arab world, we are fighting a war on two fronts. We are fighting governments and we are fighting companies. So we have certain activists that fight governments and other activists that fight companies. But unfortunately, here in the Arab world, we are fighting on two fronts, against governments and against companies. So this is why I hope that this work continues and we can keep building on what was revealed in the Facebook papers. So unfortunately, a lot of scandals came out of that. So from now on, we're not really surprised anymore after the Facebook papers. So the scandals do not surprise us anymore. So for example, this company does not have employees from Ethiopia that understand the Ethiopian language so that they can protect users in this country. So for example, I would love to delete my account of a Facebook because I do not believe in this company's policies. But at the same time, if I were to leave Facebook, this would mean that I am basically giving up on my existence on one of the most important platforms, and I'm leaving the space open for other people to spread false narratives. But at the same time, as I said, I dream of having other alternatives and alternative platforms that would help me advance my cause. And unfortunately, a lot of people are going to use Facebook as a platform to make more income and to monetize off of their core causes. So this is the bottom line of the company. This company lost more than 20 million users in the Arab world, and therefore it should start paying more and more attention to these issues. But based on my experience with this company, I don't believe that it has any certain beliefs or religious beliefs behind its causes. It only has capitalistic beliefs. So all of the campaigns that were launched by activists should continue to be undertaken so that we can exercise pressure and advance our causes, and so that users can express their opinions, and maybe they can reach a day where they are able to say that they want to delete their profiles off of Facebook or their accounts off of Facebook. So if they were to lose more and more users, this is going to be the biggest red flag to Mark Zuckerberg. Ashraf, thank you for giving us your time and thank you for your intervention during this session. We are always happy to have you with us, and we're going to move on to other sessions in Bread and Nut.